Wonders and Miracles podcast, where we celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm Liza Lawrence. I'm glad to have you join me as we celebrate wonders and miracles together. All right, well, I am here today with Heather from Idaho, and she is going to share a miracle story and many miracles that happened with the death of her grandson. And this occurred just a year and a half ago during COVID, not COVID-related death, but she'll share with us all the events of that. And before we get started, I just want to share and maybe I'll have you share your experience with why you submitted the story, and then I'll share my end.
Okay, yes. I was actually going through Facebook and I found that I had bookmarked one of your podcasts. And I thought, ooh, I want to go back and listen to that. Anyway, I got distracted and chose a different talk. But anyway, as I listened to it, I just had this story came to my mind, and I just had this really strong feeling that I should contact you and offer to share it. And it was out of the blue and it was not in my comfort zone, but I felt like, okay, there's a reason that I'm feeling this way. And so I figured out how to contact you and sent that in, and then heard back from you pretty fast. So
I love that. And the rest of the story is I had an opening this week and I prayed and said, send me my interview this week. And within that day, you had submitted a story. And so I just love how God works and how he worked through you to answer my prayer. But I also believe it's interesting because both stories in January involve deaths of an infant. And it's possible that there's someone out there who has needed to hear that God is with us in our grief and in our hard times. So I'm excited to have you share this story and grateful that you did submit it. So I'll turn the time over to you. Go ahead and tell us the story and the miracles that you saw.
okay, I will do that. So 2020 was a crazy year for all of us. We all know that. And I remember this happened in May. And so we were in full quarantine. It was, that crazy time. And, we had all the worries about protecting people we loved and who did we need to keep safe and how were we going to avoid getting sick, all of those things. And so this kind of came up in the middle of that unexpectedly. And like you said before, it was not COVID related. We had our grandson, and he was just a baby, and our daughter. He was their only child, and they came over and we were visiting. He was down for a nap, and he asphyxiated. He had actually just taken a bottle, and then went down for his nap. And he was 8 months old. That's going to be important in a minute. It was the day he turned 8 months old, actually. So he'd been born on September 21st the previous year, and then he was that day 8 months old. So, but that's what had happened. He'd breathed in, he'd thrown it up and breathed it in, and he was just in the other room. We didn't hear a sound, not a thing. And so he wasn't breathing when we checked on him. I called 911. My husband did CPR, all of the things, and we ended up losing him. And it was obviously a really hard thing, really, really hard. But the miracles were almost immediate. And so I want to share those. There are three main ones that were just amazing and that just helped me know that we weren't alone through all of this. The first started actually 7.5 years before that night. So this was May 21st was when he passed away. And we had gone, it was in the evening, we were in the hospital, and the doctor was amazing, and they'd been trying and working on him so hard and couldn't revive him, and the doctor was sweet and let us know. But that first miracle, so I'm going to rewind 7.5 years to give you the background on this miracle. So 7.5 years earlier, we had decided to take our kids to this big conference for a church. We usually just would watch these kind of meetings, at home or whatever. But this one time we wanted to be there in person and listen to the speakers in person. It was the only time we made that trip with our kids, the one time. So this was October 2012. And we took our children, we went down, and as we listened to this, one of the speakers talked about losing a child. And I remember, I was a mom, I had 4 kids. This was very tender for me to hear this story. And so I, have remembered it over the years, especially because we were there in person. I've probably heard, hundreds of these talks before, but because we were present, it stuck with me. So on this night, when we were in the hospital and we had just learned that our grandson Daron had passed away, we were ushered into this little chapel that they have. I'd never even seen it before, in the emergency room. And it's just a nice little room where we could just start to grieve. And just the four of us were in there. My daughter, Savannah, her husband, Danny, and then my husband and I. And as we sat there, this talk that I had heard came into my mind. And so I pulled out my phone and I remembered when it had been, and I pulled it up and I started sharing with my daughter. They were both sobbing. We were all crying. And I started sharing with her some of what I had remembered, because it offered sort of his experience and some of his feelings that he had to work through and how he came to know that God was involved. And this is where I'm going to tear up. So as I was reading that to her and finding some comfort in his words, which was already amazing because, again, we had been, given this, I don't know, ahead of time so that it could come to my mind. But then as I scrolled down and read about his son, and I hadn't read it in years, I read about his son, and it said that his son was 8 months old. And when I saw that, I knew that he was the very same age that our little Daron had turned that very day. I just felt and knew in my heart that God had known this was going to happen. 7.5 years earlier, he had known, and he had in this way prepared us. And so it was a tender mercy. And it just reminded me that we weren't alone, that he was aware, and that even though this was hard, that he had known and that we were not alone. So that was the first one. And that talk has actually brought us a lot of comfort many times since then. So that's our first miracle. Our second miracle, this starts with a cute little story. My daughter, so Savannah and Danny, had decided that they weren't going to have their first kiss until they got engaged. So when they had decided to get married, they were up on the hill and they had their first kiss. Well, as they kissed, the clouds overhead parted and this ray of sunlight came down, and it was really cute. Danny's got a great sense of humor, and he kind of put his hand up and he said, no watching, kids, mom and I are kissing. So that was kind of his little, and it was cute. And so that became a personal joke for them. And anytime they were ever outside and the clouds parted, he'd kiss her and say, no watching. And so it was cute. And so when we were all of a sudden planning this funeral, we were looking for a picture to go on the funeral program. And he said, I really want a picture of the Idaho Falls Temple where they had gotten married, the building where they had gotten married. He said, I want a picture of that with the clouds parting and the sun coming through. But they didn't have a picture like that. And so that day we went down and looked at the cemetery where he was going to be buried. My son-in-law's family has extended family in the area, and they had a plot that they were going to give to this couple. And so on our way back, we stopped by the temple, and the clouds parted and the sunlight came through just right when we were there, right? And he got the most beautiful picture. So that was great. We put it on the program. It was just beautiful. It was just what he wanted. Well, it continues because my daughter, when we had, these were hard decisions. I mean, this is a young couple, it's their first child. They had to decide what kind of, stone they wanted for where he would be buried. And she very quickly, I don't know, it just came out. She said, I want to have sort of an obelisk shape, that Egyptian sort of monument looking thing, kind of like the Washington Monument. She said, I want a white obelisk. And she just said it so quickly, like, that was just, it was very decisive, unusually decisive. And I thought that was interesting. So later I asked her, I said, why were you so sure? Like, why was that the thing? Because that's not maybe the typical shape, right? And she said, I don't know, I just feel like it needs to be that. Well, I'm an English major, and so I love symbolism. And I thought, I wonder what that maybe symbolizes. I was just curious, So I thought, I'm just going to see, if that particular shape has any meaning. So I did a little searching online, and it had a few different things on there, but they said that the ancient Egyptians, who often used the obelisk, used that to represent a ray of sunshine. And I thought that was just so tender. And it connected with their little personal story. And I just thought that was just so sweet. And so he does indeed, that is his little headstone, is this little white obelisk. So that was our second little miracle. And then the third one is that he passed away on the 21st. It was a Thursday. Over the next couple of days, it was a whirlwind, and we were trying to figure out all the details about the funeral and the obituary and all the things that you have to do. And one of the things is the funeral director told us, you need to find an outfit to have him buried in. Well, this is, of course, during COVID, and you remember shipping became a nightmare. And so Amazon, she found the perfect thing she wanted. My daughter wanted a little white tuxedo with little tails and just really cute outfit. But Amazon couldn't ship it that fast in time for the funeral. And nobody could. And no kidding, we drove around to everywhere we could think of, anywhere we could think of, to try to find this. And nobody had it. And if they did, it wasn't in his size. It was completely, for older toddlers or whatever. And so I was starting to get really worried. And because this was important to her, became very important to me, right? I didn't want just anything, although we couldn't find anything that was just all white, it was crazy. But because, I wanted it to be just right. And I was calling places, in Utah, like all around the state, trying to find somebody that we could go drive and pick it up. Anyway, it was becoming very difficult. Finally, on Monday, it was Memorial Day that year. It was the 25th. So everything was closed. And it was Monday morning, and I thought, okay, we're running out of time. And so I prayed. I got on my knees and I said, I know there are many more important things in the world, and I know it'll be fine. Whatever we have to do, we'll do. But if we could have this would be a great help to just help comfort her a little bit. When I finished praying, I had the thought to get on Facebook and just post something and just say, does anybody have any ideas? I thought maybe somebody will know somebody else who, I don't know, would have some wedding clothes or something, And it was only 5 minutes later that our neighbors, oh my goodness, Rob and Katie, showed up at our door with this little white, little baby boy tuxedo. And it was exactly what my daughter had wanted. And I was just so grateful they gave it to us, and it was great. And then I looked at the size on the tuxedo, and it was a 3 to 6 month. And our grandson was 8 months and very tall for his age. Like, I don't remember, really high percentile, really tall boy. And my first thought was, oh no, after all this, it's not going to fit. And then immediately I had the thought, if God provides a miracle, it's going to be the right size miracle, right? Whatever that means, it's going to be right. So we took it to the funeral home, and then later we were able to go back. I went back with them, the couple, as they got to see him one last time, hold him one last time. And it fit. It fit all the way to the ankles. All the way to the feet, just like you would want, all the way to the wrists. It couldn't have fit more perfectly. It was just so. Those are some of the things that happened that just, even though it wasn't. We would have done anything to undo it, right? If we could have. But knowing that God knew, that he was involved, that he was sending blessings in the midst of all that, really helped get us through that. And the other amazing thing, and I've talked to the other people since who have said they have felt this themselves, but we could feel other people's prayers for us. We knew, we had friends, we had family, community members, so many people who were supportive. But I remember just feeling carried, and it was almost tangible. And you've probably heard this before. You've done so many of these. We felt just carried. It was like my heart was broken, and it was in pieces that were not whole, not together. And yet it was like there was like this batting or this blanket just wrapped around it, just carrying us through. It was the most amazing thing. I could feel those prayers. And so I've taken my prayers a lot more seriously since then. When I hear that somebody's struggling, I pray for them, because I know that has power that's beyond anything I can explain. So, and I guess there's just one last thing that I was thinking of, and that is For that first 3 days after he passed, we didn't stop crying. We just walked around the house. We were all together here. And it was like nonstop crying. We all had red eyes and puffy faces and things. And then for days afterwards, it would take very little and it would trigger it. I mean, as you would expect with a loss. And we would just put our arms around each other and just a lot of tears. Well, there was a day, and it was probably just a few weeks later. And I've heard this with people before, that they would feel maybe the person they've lost, sometimes they would be able to feel them near. And I'd hoped for that. But a few weeks later, I was out. We have a little 3-year-old granddaughter who's not a lot older than Daron was. They were pretty close, but from our other daughter. And so we were out. We each handled our grief a little differently. My husband built a little monument for my grandson, went out, and he just needed to cut some wood and pound some nails. And, so since it was going to be a long time until we had the headstone, he built a little version of it himself. And that was kind of his project. My son-in-law went out and planted raspberries along the side of our garden during that week while we were waiting for the funeral. And so we call them Daron berries when we pick the little berries now. But my project was to build a little Daron garden in the backyard, where we have a bench and he was known as our little dragon. He had little dragon toys and dragon blankets and all the things. So I put a little sleeping dragon by the bench and some solar lights and things like that. So my granddaughter and I were walking out around the house to go sit in the little Daron garden. And I was thinking about him. And as soon as I did, normally I would kind of cry. I would tear up and just feel this sadness and this loss. But this particular time, as we were walking around the back, instead, I had this sudden wave of joy. And I had been invited a while back to notice what joy feels like inside of me. And I had come to discover that when I feel joy, it feels like a circle around my heart. I just feel this burning, and it's a circle right around my heart. And so here we are walking back there, and I think about Daron, and this circle just lights up. Like, I just feel like I'm on fire. And I was just so amazed because it was so different. Usually I would either feel sad, feel the loss, or I would feel maybe grateful, that we had him, or just, tender feelings. This was different. This was distinctly different. It was just this incredible happiness and this powerful feeling. And it occurred to me that maybe I was feeling his presence, that this was different. Like I said, I don't know how to explain it beyond that. It was different from what I usually felt. And I thought, I think he's here. I think that was his little arm around me, just letting me know that he's here. And so that was very special. And there have been a few moments like that. So anyway, lots of miracles around us, lots of miracles. And I'm just so grateful for that.
These are so beautiful. I always tear up with these tender stories where there is death of an infant and the grief that happens with that. And I actually remember when this happened, I was one that prayed for your family, and I too have experienced that carrying of prayers. It's so amazing.
It's amazing.
And I remember hearing a story of a man who he had a near-death experience, and he was in the back of the ambulance and could feel people praying for him, and even angels praying for him, which was fascinating. And he said, so now he prays when he sees an ambulance go by, he prays for the person in there. And he said he even asks for angelic prayers on the behalf of people, which is fascinating. So
I love that.
I know, I love the power of prayer. And I do think it's a tangible energy that we can feel. So I love that you said that. Another thing that I love that you said, which really touched me in relation to why God cares about the things we care about. As a parent, you cared that your daughter found the perfect outfit for her baby, and you only cared because she cared. And that's how God feels about us. I really believe that he does care for the things we care about, and he cares to answer those prayers. And just like in the very beginning, me praying, send me a story, and you answered that prayer. Those little things,
little things, that's right.
Those tiny little things he cares about. And I think when we notice those and acknowledge that those are miracles and that is God helping us, it helps us feel that joy and gratitude for those amazing, and it makes it so awe-inspiring,
That's
right? The
right.
fact that your neighbor came and had the right outfit and it fit perfectly. So, Heather, these are beautiful stories, and I know so many people at times of grief, which it feels like so many are going through things like that with COVID and with all of the things going on in the world. The death rate, I actually read a statistic, it's up by like 40%
Oh, wow.
around the world. Like it's high. So many people are dealing with grief right now. And, maybe these stories can help them notice where God is aware of them and helping them and guiding them through their pain and then that loss.
I hope so, because I have no doubt that he is very involved in all of that.
Yeah, me too. I love that you felt your grandson's presence as joy. And if you think about a small child who's passed, they would be in that state of joy. And I think that that's really special that you could recognize it as that. And I also see a miracle in there that God had prepped you for understanding that feeling and understanding that emotion for you
That's
personally.
that's really true. That's really true, because I don't know that I would have noticed as much without that. That is true.
Yeah. I'm so grateful that you saw those miracles in this hard time and a sad time. But I also love too how you mentioned it was okay to cry through it all. It was okay to grieve. It's okay to feel all the feels that you're going to and not try to get over it too fast or, move through it in shame it or any of that. Like just allow it to be the process. And it feels like you did that. It sounds like you did that.
That's right. That's the thing. It didn't take away the sadness, but it made it, I don't know, it made it okay. It gave light to the situation. It made it beautiful instead of just sad. It was both. It was that rainbow through the clouds. It was both. There were clouds, there were storm clouds, but there was also light. And so it was all right.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Anything else you wanted to share before we end?
I think that's it. I think that's all of it.
I love all those little pieces. I think it's a miraculous. God is amazing to me, how he
He is
knows us
amazing.
and he knows what we need when we need it. So,
And once we know that, then whatever else we deal with, we can handle. Once we see his hand in one part of our lives, we can know that he's involved in the other parts as well. So
yes,
that's the
amen
blessing.
to that. I love that. We'll close with that thought because
Okay.
it's beautiful. So, thank
Thank
you, Heather,
you.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this miracle story. Please subscribe to my channel if you liked it. You can also find me on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. And remember to notice and celebrate miracles everywhere, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen.